Hey everyone, and welcome to QuantumAcacias. My name is Dee Dee. Oh, let me turn off this thing, child. My name is Dee Dee, and welcome to the channel. If you are new, like most people are right now, hey, make sure that you come in, subscribe, do all the fun things that we do here on YouTube, everything like that. Today, I wanted to do an adventures in the Astrals, which is also going to be a story time as well. A lot of these dreams and things like that I'll be talking about on the channel, they also connect into like my day-to-day life. Usually I get, okay. I just saw like the light in the microwave blink just now. Sometimes it does that when there's spirits around. Okay, anyways, so a lot of the time I get messages in visions, things like that, and then they add some gravity to it in the dream world. And so then when I wake up, I'm usually looking at information and things like that. So I wanted to kind of explain what Adventures in the Astrals is. So today we're going to be talking about why I have named the channel QuantumAcacias. Why have I named it QuantumAcacias? And this has to do with next year for 2025. If you're feeling this pull as well, so I hope it finds everyone it's supposed to in efficient divine timing. 2025, and I'm saying this because a lot of the time these things happen in groups. So if you're finding this, then there's probably a opportunity next year for you to also experience this. And it happens in groups. So some people might be in this this energy for 2025, and maybe there probably are, other groups for 2025. But the group that I'm a part of, I am doing a year with the Dakinis next year. And there's a whole story with the Dakinis, but I don't really want to talk about it right now. But Dakinis are Skywalker beings. They're usually female emanations of wisdom. Sometimes they can come down and take a human form. Sometimes you'll see them in the dream or the astrals. And it seems like pretty universally they come to bring some type of form of wisdom. Now, either that is in a dancing and playful way, or for other people, unfortunately, it's 1019. I associate 119 to the ancestors. For other people, they come in a wrathful form. So this is more of like the chaotic illuminations of life. So anyways, there's this big pull next year to do this year of dedication of allowing things to unfold without putting a certain type of energy into it. I'm not exactly sure how to really explain it other than to say that there's been this message that I've been getting that 2025 for certain groups of people is going to be deity versus angel. Okay, and not like versus as far as like they're going to be fighting with each other. I'm just using these two kind of archetypal energies to explain the difference in energies. Okay, usually when we're talking about deities, right? This is usually someone that you have to make an offering to, a gesture to, in order to get their help. Okay, usually around the board. There is some type of thing that you have to do to anchor in their help, or to keep their help consistent. Okay. Now, of course, that is the general term. Of course, people have different connections and things like that, and you don't always have to make an offering. Some of them you might have more of a familial connection to, but I'm just talking about the archetypal energy of the deity. Whereas with an angelic energy, you're usually going there with like your emotions on your sleeve, with your feelings and your worries and things, and asking for help. And that usually does not require any type of offering or sacrifice or anything. So these two different archetypes. It has been coming to my attention that 2025 is going to be a certain reversal of energies, a sort of weighing the scales, in the sense that this would be a great year to offer something to the angels. And for the deities, this would be a good year to allow time and space to see what deity is going to come and make an offering to you. I don't know the weight or the gravity of this, but this is the feeling that I have. So in 2025, there is this sort of energy of I really hate to use harvest. It has such a selfish kind of feeling to it, or like a sort of like that could be my own. It could be my own projections onto it. I mean, of course, when people are harvesting crops, but I don't know. I just don't like the feel of that word. So instead, I want to use this is like a year of. I don't know, reaping has the same type of, it has the same type of feel. This is like a year of, I don't know, absorbing as well. Receiving, we'll just say that. Receiving things that you have been manifesting. We'll just say it like that. We'll just go with New Age, okay? Receiving things that you have been manifesting. And so 2025 is feeling like a very feminine energy year. So focusing more on beauty, focusing more on aesthetics, focusing more on beautifying your home, beautifying your life. This is a time of also allowing things to come that you've already been putting out. It feels like this is not a working year in that sense. Now, of course, using, obvious things, like I'm not saying like quit your job or something like that. Do you know what I'm saying? But in general, there's almost this kind of retrograde energy. Maybe Venus retrograde is going to be really important next year as well. This kind of sitting on something and checking, okay, am I feeding something my energy that is not giving a return on it? And it's very strange because when you're in a natural rhythm with something, right, you don't usually have to do that type of check-in, right? Because sometimes it's not going to be 50-50. Sometimes it's 80-20. Sometimes it's 30-70. Sometimes it's 100-0 in certain places. But usually when you get into a rhythm with life, then things have a way of balancing out naturally. And then they have a way of going back out of balance. Do you know what I'm saying? So this kind of chaos and neutral is a rhythm of life. But there's something very important about this year saying, okay, is this reflecting back to me who I am? I have done X, Y, and Z for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3 years, for 10 years, and has what I've been doing or the people I have been around, have they been giving that back to me in this certain sense? And I feel like it is more of a year of checking the emotional thing, like the emotional connection back. I feel like back in Aquarius, like the full moon in Aquarius back in Leo season was more about results and checking the results, whereas 2025 is more about emotional support. So anyways, that has kind of been today. About like 20 minutes ago, I started getting this feeling of to let my ancestors back into my energy, which is funny because I didn't necessarily think that I had them out of my energy, but they're like, you're very walled off in certain senses, and you tend to spiritually journey by yourself, which I definitely do. I hardly ever have someone with me while I'm journeying or in the astrals. Sometimes like I have people with me and they're traveling, but it's not like we went there necessarily together. And so I thought that this would be an interesting time to talk about the story of the Acacia, because Basset has been coming up a lot. And I have a personal experience with Basset. At some point, I will talk about that. But that is a very deep conversation. It's very intense. So I don't want to spend too much time on that right now. But Basset has been coming up. This black cat energy has been coming up. What I will say about the Basset energy that has been my experience is that Basset would be directly connected to Babylon. And when the certain Christian sects or Abrahamic sects of things are against Babylon, this is against a sort of indigenous African spirituality belief system. And it's more than a belief system. This is against that whole system as a whole. So not just including Basset, but against that form of producing results, we'll say. Now, I don't know if that's in people's history books or anything like that, but that has been my experience. I also would say that a lot of secret societies, especially certain ones that are really well known, also pull their energies from the energy of Basset, of the black cat. Okay. And even though there are a lot of negative associations, there is a lot of positive associations as well. So I feel like that's like obvious, but I also want to say that because, of course, our standards of what is good or what makes sense or what is like morally or mentally sound, it can be drastically different than what was a part of honor or glory or, empathy and things like that back in the G. Okay. Okay. So anyways, so this astral happened in September 2022. Now, the interesting thing about it is that I don't have any of my notes since before October 1st. So I don't even know what specific day that I had this dream, but I will say that there was a lot going on, especially with what I would consider to be extraterrestrial, or maybe not even extraterrestrial, maybe dimensional things that could be connected here, but in a different dimension. There was definitely a lot of that going on for me in September 2022. So if you also had some crazy stuff like that, maybe some quote unquote, typical abduction experiences or something like that, this definitely could be a message for you as well. Okay, let me slow down. When it starts, when the energy starts getting intense, I start getting really winded. So I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. So back in September, I ended up having this dream where, and it wasn't a dream, I'm just using dream because that's something that we can think about the location of it, I guess. Like it was when I was sleeping and I was consciously aware of it, but this was not a dream necessarily. This was something more than just like a standard typical dream. So anyways, I was seeing the blackness, which I usually don't see the transition into dreams. And I feel like most of us don't necessarily see the transition into dreams. We just kind of, sometimes fall asleep, and then, hopefully if you're lucid enough, you catch consciousness in the middle of a scene that's already happening. And then you're kind of interacting with it and seeing what's going on. Sometimes I do feel like it's a sort of simulation. Sometimes I feel like, well, that could get complicated. I think it could be a lot of different things. But specifically for this one, I did see the blackness and I saw that I was transitioning somewhere. So I was in the blackness and I kid you not, I literally jumped down into a dimension underneath me. Okay. Like, it was literally like a cartoon. And I literally, like, it wasn't the sky. It was like a different dimension. Like, and I could see the top of the dimension where the sky was like starting, and I just dropped down into it. And I've done that probably like 3 or 4 times very vividly that I can remember. So this is like not the typical experience that I have. But I knew what to do. So I just dropped down, and I couldn't exactly see where I was going to drop down. I was just like free falling, trust falling. And I just assumed that I was going to fall onto something that I wasn't going to break my dream body leg. And thank goodness that actually turned out to be true, because when I dropped down, it was perfectly positioned where I was on this tree, which, of course, after I woke up, I would see that it was the acacia tree. Now, the interesting thing is that when I dropped down and I was like fully in the reality but falling to the top of this tree, I immediately turned into a vulture. Immediately. And I've definitely had dreams where like I transitioned into different animals. But as far as I can remember, that's the first time that I actually was a vulture. Not that was the first time I was a vulture in life, because it was a very seamless transition. It means that I've done that before. But it's been a while since I've been a vulture. That's what I would say. It's not the typical animal in this lifetime that I shapeshift into. I guess that's how I would say it. So anyways, I turned into a vulture. I immediately knew what I was, and I landed on one of the branches. Now, the acacia tree, to me, as someone who does not know much about trees in general, especially not specific species and things like that, in the dream, I was like, this looks like the dragon's blood tree, but I don't think it's the dragon's blood tree. But what I did remember is that all of the leaves were upwards, okay? All of the leaves and the branches were bent upwards. And I thought that was very, very interesting. And like I said, to me, it looked like the dragon's blood tree, but I knew it wasn't the dragon's blood tree. And what I kept hearing in my head was, this is the only tree in the desert. Because as I was landing on one of the sections, because it was not only just that the branches were up, but they were also like grouped together going up. So it literally looked like what you would consider to be like a family tree, like literally. So I was on one section of the branches, and I remember hearing, this is the only tree in the desert. And when I looked out, it was definitely the desert, and it was the only tree. And it was literally the only tree in the desert. I was like, whoa, where did all the other trees go? And so I was like, okay, not only is it the only tree in the desert, but it's like it's not even teeming with life anymore. So I was like, okay, we must be here to establish trees again. We must be here to bring back water again. Now, that's a whole nother conversation, because a lot of the reason that I came out to Arizona, specifically why I moved from New Orleans to Arizona, has to do with this idea of bringing water back to the desert. And not just water, but clouds, but water back to the desert, okay? Now, in what way, I don't know, and that is still building up, but that was the feeling in this dream, was like, oh, okay, it's the desert. And there's so much history beneath the sands. And if we can figure out how to bring the trees and the roots and the grass and the greenery back, then we can get eventually an ecosystem out here. We can get humans back out here. We can get building back out here. And so I knew that I was there to go and see if there were any signs of life, besides the tree. Because even though the tree was there, and I feel like it was like pretty established throughout the dimensions, because maybe I was feeling the energy of it before I dropped down, it still has to have life in order to sustain in that dimension. Like to keep a form. It's not like I guess you could say like a tree is like a body, but in order to keep a form in that dimension, like a dimensional representation, so to speak, there has to be life surrounding it. Obviously, because trees need water and sunlight, and, and an ecosystem definitely helps to keep the fruits like blooming. And so we knew that at some point, because I was definitely a part of a group of beings. It wasn't just me in the dimension above, but I like volunteered to go down and see what was going on. So anyways, it wasn't going to survive that long. And I feel like that's why they were telling me like, this is the last tree in the desert. And so, I decided to take flight. And I flew throughout this desert, and it was very small sand dunes. And I noticed that there wasn't just huge sand mountains and things like that. There were some that were like a little bit bigger, but it was like even the sand dunes were like drying up or whisking away or something. And I remembered that this what it felt like to me. It was like the Twilight Zone kind of. It was like the whole thing was orange, pinkish, maybe slightly purple, but it was almost like you would, I don't know how to describe that accurately, but it was almost like a purple that you wouldn't necessarily notice outright. Like if you stared at it long enough and someone was like, oh, there's some purple, you'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, actually I can see it. But it's like you had to really stare for the purple. But it was mainly orange. It was like sherbet kind of. Kind of like sherbet, yeah. So anyways, it felt like I was flying for eons. When I tell you, I was like, oh my gosh, like there's no water, there are no bugs, there are no people, there are no tree. I mean, I was just like, wow. This is wild. I'm like, how am I going to get back to the tree? Like, have I even been paying attention enough to get back to the tree? Because you could easily get lost out there. It almost feels like a time loop. And it's not a time loop. It's that deserted. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And I didn't even have time to think about like, how did it even get to this way? I was just like, okay, there's got to be some type of something. And there definitely was a full moon. But like I said, this was like a full moon in the midst of the sun. So it was not dark whatsoever. And it was like permanent. What is that? Is that dawn? It was a little bit higher than dawn though, because I think dawn is still kind of when the sun is coming up. So there's still some darkness. This was like, it wasn't high noon. It was like not quite high noon yet because it wasn't blazing sun. There still would have been like breezes, I would say. And it was like perpetually like that. Like the moon was stuck there. The sun was stuck in its position. Everything was like stuck. So as I was flying, I finally, oh my gosh, and I was so excited about this. I finally found, like when I tell you it was like a drop. It was a little bit more obviously, but like 20 drops of water. It was like a miniature pond. And so I landed as this vulture and I put my beak into the water to taste the water. And I was like, oh my gosh, we finally found some life. And I knew that even though it was just this really tiny thing of water, that tiny thing of water could call water back to the desert. That we just needed, I mean, and this was much more than a mustard seed, right? This is much more than a mustard seed. But, like in comparison to like a mustard seed, it was like 10 mustard seeds. I knew that if we could find some water there, then we could multiply it. But we had to find some. And it was a small amount in comparison to the desert. but in comparison to how much we needed, it was more than enough. And so I was so excited. I was dancing and everything. And then I was back to my human self. And I was like, uh-oh. So I don't know if I was so excited that like I forgot to hold the form or whatever it was. Because I just felt like it was easier to fly as a vulture. And maybe because like the vulture was bigger, it could cover more wingspan or some, more span. Child, what type of span is that? I could cover more span, I could cover more ground. I'll just say it that way. I could cover more ground, maybe. I don't know. I feel like the vulture was also really significant because, of course, when you look at the acacia tree and the goddess that's associated to the acacia tree, she's usually associated to being a vulture. So I was a part of a family of vultures, which I've seen that before. Kind of the darker side is the vulture and the lighter side is the dove. So I, at that point, forgot how to shift back into a vulture because then I was going to go back to the tree and I was like, yes, I can go back and report that, like, I found some, like, we're good to go. We're good to go. Yay. And so I had to just kind of do like a run jump situation. And I was okay. I just hope that it works. And it did. So I shifted back into a vulture and I flew back to the acacia tree. And then I went back up into the dimension to let them know that there was water. So this is the basis of me calling the channel QuantumAcacias, because I've also seen a representation of this acacia tree in the astrals as, very much like on Loki, like as a cosmic tree. So not just a world, not just on Earth, but a cosmic tree. And that's a whole conversation. I'll have to talk about that in a little bit more detail later. But I thought that would be really interesting because they're like, go watch Wakanda, the first one, and go back to the ancestor land. And I'm realizing that, the tree looked exactly like that. It looked exactly like the tree in Wakanda when he gets covered with the red dust or red sand, and then he transitions. And I think I've talked about like red ochre. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, OCHRE. And then the dead, DED or DD, and its connection to actually blood, not necessarily death as a transition. Now, seeing that could mean moot or what we call death, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. It also has to do with the hidden being brought to light as well. So I thought that would be interesting. Let me know if you've had certain dreams like this. I would love to hear about it, especially if you've had something similar about, bringing water back to the desert, or it's like bring back the oasis, and then from the oasis we can build. But of course, the oasis is more about human life, right? That's about reestablishing human life on a land, and I don't think we're even there yet. We have to establish an ecosystem first. We have to establish like better weather conditions so they can even stay in that area first. So anyways, that's what I wanted to talk about. Sending you guys lots of love, lots of hugs, hoping that this Christmas season is going to be so awesome. And remember your relatives this Christmas too, alive and past. All right, and as always, if you want to get a reading or a dream interpretation, or maybe like a mind, I'm kind of doing something like past life regression. I've been working on my own induction process and stuff like that. So if you're interested, as I'm developing it, so it's in development stages, you can email me at quantumacacias@gmail.com. All right, friends. Bye. Oh, and actually, I was doing a little bit of a refresher as I finished this, and I wanted to say two things. This particular acacia tree looked like an upside down umbrella. So it was the umbrella acacia tree specifically. And also, I didn't mention that neat is also associated to the acacia tree as well, which in Egypt it's called something else. And I'm not sure what it's called, so I don't know if it's Shandet, I don't know if it's Rehenet. That might just be a general word, I don't know. But I wanted to add those two things as well. Okay, back.